We have an out-of-town, out-of-state guest today. And this gentleman is, I met him in March, I believe. Did you come in March, Delvis? And he is representing the Convention of States. Now, there's so many people who say the Convention of States has this problem, that problem, whatever. But I think Delvis's message will make sense to you, especially having just heard what we've heard from the other three presenters. He's a Christian man, he's a husband, father, he's a family man, he's a small business owner, he's a farmer, he's a conservationist, and an avid outdoorsman. Having grown up in Southeast Georgia, Delvis understands the values that we hold near and dear to our hearts and is committed to representing these uniquely conservative Georgia values. I got this off of his website when he was running for Congress. That's what I thought. In the 12th district, is that right? Delvis's faith is the center point of his being. His relationship with Jesus Christ and God creates the foundation for his approach to life and his decision-making. It is this relationship that has guided his enthusiasm towards being a public servant. Delvis Dutton was born in Savannah and has lived in Glenville, Georgia, most of his life. He spent a short time in Atlanta before coming back to South Georgia, where he graduated from Pinewood Christian Academy in Belleville, Georgia. After high school, he attended Georgia Southern University, worked for the United Postal Service for 7 years. At the age of 22, Delvis left UPS to begin a journey to create a water well drilling and service company named General Pump and Well. In addition to owning and operating a small business, Delvis has been around farming his entire life, having grown up on a working family farm for over 20 years. Delvis has a thorough understanding of the challenges facing farmers. First elected in 2010, Delvis currently serves in the Georgia House of Representatives. Is that still true? No. Okay. He's going to correct that for you. Okay. Being willing to serve comes naturally to Delvis, and the Dutton family has a long history of public service in Tatnall County. The Duttons have served the citizens of Tatnall County for more than 50 years, including Delvis's grandfather, Mandel Dutton, who served as chairman of the Tatnall County Commission in addition to his mom. Brenda Kicklighter, who was a public servant for the Department of Agriculture and Department of Corrections for many years in Atlanta. He's married to the former Danielle Harrell, a public school teacher from Reedsville, and together they have 2 children, Delvis and Danielle, and their family attends Trinity Baptist Church. I'm at the point where protection by our citizens, as we've just heard from 3 different people, to claiming the state back as belonging to us. And we have to cooperate with the other states, just as they did in the mid-1700s. And that's why I believe in the Convention of States, and I hope you will enjoy what he has to say and come to an understanding that he brought to me. Delvis Dutton.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you for having me. Now that you know my pedigree, what she says is true. I was running a water well drilling company, loving what I did, and yeah, I was passionate about it every day, getting to meet every walk of life. And it was in 2010 that I realized that I was unwilling to do what I expected everyone else to be doing in elected office. I got to a point where I didn't trust the system. I was fed up with the political system at hand, fed up with the politicians doing what they wanted to do and not doing what they were elected to do. So ultimately I ended up running and was successful and served in Georgia for 4 years in the House, and fought on a number of fronts until there was another little call in my life to run for Congress last year. And now I am the legislative director for Convention of States, a national organization pushing for a convention of state delegates to discuss matters such as a balanced budget amendment for Washington. As she said, it's a new idea. It's actually a very controversial among friends, if you will, of having a discussion of what it is and how we do it, because we've never gone down this path. While serving in the legislature in Georgia, I was against this for 3 years. And it wasn't that I just stuck my head in the sand and said no. I was actually drug around the country, meetings, conferences all over the country, because my colleague, best friend in the House, was a supporter of this from the day he ran for office in 2010. So he drugged me into these conferences, drugged me into these meetings, and I just never could get comfortable. My problem was, how do you hand over the Constitution that I hold near and dear to a bunch of politicians? I didn't have gray hair when I got elected. And I'm thinking it would take 13 principal legislatures to stand in the way of ripping apart the Constitution that I hold near and dear. And I could never get, I didn't believe that was possible. And it was not until December of 13 I went into the Mount Vernon Assembly at the home of Washington, when we had 102 delegates from 28 different states. And I was probably the only one that went in as a heck no when we went into that meeting to discuss Article 5 and what it would look like for the states. In that room, I realized it was quite the opposite. Not how do you get 13 principal legislatures to stand in the way, but how do you get 13 colonies to ever agree to anything? I looked around the room and I heard these politicians. I heard the egos. I heard the ones that wanted to hear themselves speak. I heard the difference of opinion. Some that wanted you to take them outside. Some I wanted you to, made you want to stand up and clap and cheer. But I realized with the different cultural backgrounds that we have and geographical backgrounds, getting 13 colonies to agree is why the colonies thought they would never get a constitution. Getting these many different backgrounds to agree is nearly impossible. Then I sat there and thought, all right, well, this will take 38 states to ratify anything being discussed. How on earth can you get 38 states together? And I sat there and did the math. Keep in mind, I was against Article 5, not because I dispute that Article 5 exists. It was a tool given in the Constitution in the original writings all the way through the process of giving us the Constitution. It was never disputed. But my problem was, that's a tool we don't need to touch, because we're in a culture right now where all we have is politicians doing whatever they want to do. But when I went to doing the math of the ratification of 38 states, we have 99 House and Senate chambers in this country. Nebraska only having one. And I'm sitting there in this room with 102 delegates at Mount Vernon, and which is near and dear to my heart, because we've been a part of the Appeal to Heaven movement in Georgia ever since 2010, actually 2011, which was the flag that Washington flew over his naval cruisers, arguably the first flag of the nation, and holding to the principles of what that flag stood for when it was sewn together. There's a large group of us in Georgia that held to that for 4 years. And I'll say now it's being represented in 14 different states, actually here in Mississippi as well, by a few of your elected leaders. But in that look, 99 House and Senate chambers, 13 of those 99 say no, and the amendment is dead. And then you sit there and you say, okay, well, every chamber requires committee work. So then you take that 99 and multiply it by 2. If 13 of those separate committees say no, the amendment is dead. And then you say, okay, well, the majority of states require subcommittee work before it gets to the committee. So then you take that number and multiply it by 2. Subcommittee in each chamber, the House and Senate. If one chairman of a subcommittee in the House of your state says, I'm not even going to take this up for a vote, the amendment is dead. So then I sit there and realize the ratification is impossible. It's never been done in this way, and I'm sitting there in that room thinking, I just don't think that you can ever get that many legislatures to agree to the same thing, that many politicians to agree. The perfection that was laid out in the ratification process protects this country. But what I realized was, if we did have delegates go from 38 plus states, blue and red, to have a discussion of what we face collectively in our states, back to federalism, which is what I actually ran for Congress for, was to turn my back to Washington, understanding what was going on there, but strengthening my state and creating a committee in our House and Senate for federalism. But I sat there and realized that if we send delegates, this is a legislative matter. This has nothing to do with the executive branch. It has nothing to do with the judiciary. Realizing that 38 state legislatures standing together, there's no greater authority. The Supreme Court or the President of the United States has no authority over 38 state legislatures standing united. Realizing that we're a divided nation. We're all fighting on individual fronts. We're not a union. This country was never intended for a city to control the entire country. We have 50 separate states that have sovereign boundaries, but not today. We're districts, and we're told what to do by one city. So realizing this, realizing the importance of sending members of our legislative bodies to have a discussion of what we face, and then knowing that the arguments that are there, I'm not a constitutional scholar, I'm a well-digger. Knowing the constitutional arguments of whether you can control your delegates or not, I do believe that what we did in our Delegate Selection Limitation Act, which is where my passion went after being in this meeting, I believe we can control our delegates in Georgia. I believe they will pay a price if they don't do what we ask them to do. But I also saw the gamesmanship of politics and the partisanship taken out in this delegate convention. I had to be in that room in Mount Vernon to see this. What happens when you get elected to the House or the Senate or Congress is immediately you say, oh, these are my principles, this is what I stand for, this is my convictions, but I have to work with these colleagues for 2, 5, 10 years. So I have to take, this is what the majority do, I have to take my convictions and set them aside, and I have to go along to get along because the speaker is not going to like me voting against his bill. Or the governor is not going to sign my bill if I vote against his legislation. So you see good men and women set their principles to the side because of the gamesmanship of politics. And you also see, well, I can't meet with 5 members of the opposing party because if I do, I'm seen as a sellout by the constituents that elected me. If your congressional member meets with 5 members of the opposing party, we, me included, we all think they're sellouts. And quite honestly, they probably are. But in a delegate convention, it's with all due respect, I'm never going to see you again. I don't need you to vote for me for speaker. I don't need you to sign my next bill. This is where Georgia stands. This is where Mississippi stands. This is where Maryland stands. It also takes, if you go meet with 5 members of the opposing party in a delegate convention, you're seen as a leader. And what I saw in that room, you can take the worst politicians in your state and send as a delegate. And it's even more true for a politician than it is for a statesman. They have to come back a hero. They have to come back and bow their chest up and say that they were the savior for their state. They have to come home with what their state was going to buy no matter what. Now, a statesman, a principled individual that forgoes any cost politically or any cost worldly, financial cost, will sit there and say, well, you know what, I know my state will never ratify this, but this is where I agree and this is where I'm going to vote, and I vote for this to go back for ratification. But the check is the ratification process. For anything to ever be ratified through this Article 5 process, it will honestly take Democrats and Republicans to completely agree that the states are facing this problem and have lost their sovereign voice in 1913 when we got the 17th Amendment. But I will tell you, I've actually traveled to 20 states meeting with House and Senate leaders of both parties, blue states and red states. And there are common grounds. We all believe that 46 states require some form of a balanced budget process in our constitutions. 46 states require that. We all believe that Washington should have to do the same. Every state I've been in, blue and red, they believe that we lost our sovereign voice and that we lost our sovereignty as states. And I do believe we may not ever see a repeal of the 17th, which is what I would love to see, but what I will tell you is there is a serious discussion of what can be done to correct the problem that was created by that amendment, of taking the representation away from the state legislatures, having no accountability for a U.S. Senator. There are things that's going to be discussed in this that I will completely disagree with, I feel certain. But I will tell you, what I've seen is in the extremes of both states. The concern as well, in a blue state as well, there will be a proposed amendment that comes out of this convention that goes back for ratification that says that life begins at conception. And I can't agree with that. And I can't allow us to go and have this conversation because you could amend our Constitution to say that. And I say, well, then what you're having to assume is that 13 committees in the most liberal states of this country would actually vote to pass that. It's just not possible. And then the other side is, well, the Second Amendment. We don't have the First Amendment without the Second Amendment, and there will be states that propose an amendment to remove the Second Amendment from the Constitution. Well, what you're having to assume is that any state in the SEC would vote to remove the Second Amendment. That's just not going to happen. So, why now? When I was in this congressional room, and it was providential, it made no political sense. I could have stayed in the seat that I was holding in Georgia for 20 years, but that's not what I ran for. I could hold it for 8 years and get retirement the rest of my life from the state of Georgia, and that's not why I ran. I ran in this congressional race. It was a very quick race that I knew I was in a sprint. But I think looking back on it, it was the most remarkable time in my life. But one of the main things that I saw clearly was every dollar we spent, I raised $230,000 in 11 weeks. Every dollar we had to spend it on 55 and overs. You could not take a dollar of that campaign and spend it south of 55 because you'd be throwing it away. If you look around this room right now, look at the average age. The 55 and overs will go vote. Does not matter if there's a tornado 5 miles away from their polling precinct. They're going to go vote. South of 55, I'll give you 3 minutes to tell me why I should take time out of my life and go vote for you. Because either one of you is going to do whatever you want to do when you get there. And in that 3 minutes, you better lie to me and tell me what I want to hear. Because if you don't, he will, and I'm going to go vote for them if I go vote. I don't want the truth. I want the 3-minute lies. My point is, when the 55 and olders, every elected leader that we have right now in this state, in this country, are elected by the 55 and olders, right or wrong. They're starving for the truth. They look for the truth. They try to weed through the rhetoric that you're seeing in these campaigns. They want to know the truth of who the person is and what they truly believe, and they're going to go vote. My point is, when the 55 and olders are gone, this republic is lost. My generation and South, we don't, largely across this country, we don't have the education discussion of the Constitution and the foundation that gave us this country. We don't discuss the freedoms or the foundation that we came from in our homes. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to hear about it. We're fed up with the people that actually run for office. And we will buy those lies because we just tune everything else out. We don't want to know the truth. So what we'll end up with is the elect taking and spending as much money as they have to buy a position of power and telling the people how to live their lives. So getting off of that a minute, that's why now. Right now, we have 4 states that have passed convention states application. Georgia, Florida, Alaska, and Alabama just did this year. 3 of the states passed it last year when it was just an idea. This year was an awakening. We had applications filed in 36 separate states this year. To our knowledge, it's never been done in the history of this nation, that the same aggregate language has been filed and introduced for consideration by 36 states at the same time. And we had considerable movement because of the backbone, the salt of these states. When you look at the people that are involved with Convention of States, and I had to take 2 months to look into this before I agreed to be a part of this. I looked at their background, looked where they came from, I looked what they've done in their lives. They're the salt in all these states. They believe in the Constitution, they believe in the founding principles that gave us this country. Mississippi needs your help. There's considerable legislators in your legislature that believe in this, but the political reality is some of these states haven't awakened to it yet. It is an awakening process. I will tell you this, as we get closer to a convention, we will get there with blue and red states. When we get closer to a convention, millennials are waking up. The 38 members are waking up wanting to know, all right, what are y'all doing now? What is this? What are you trying to do? You've already put me in debt for the rest of my life. I was in a committee hearing in Missouri, and there was a 23-year-old testifying. And he was testifying to a Senate committee, and he said, let me tell you, he said, all of you see this $18 trillion as a debt. He said, me and my generation, we see it as a tax. And it's taxation without representation. Something a revolution was followed. And he's right. It gave me chills when I was sitting there. I hadn't even thought of it that way. But through this awakening, they're saying, okay, well, skeptical, what are you doing? And when they read Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution, they're like, wait, y'all have this right? Why haven't you been doing it already? To use this right, we as legislative bodies for the collective states have to choose how we send our delegates. And we have to make the call for the Convention of States application, a unified call for an Article 5 convention. The BBA, the Balanced Budget Amendment, there's a group out there pushing for that in Article 5. The Compact for a Balanced Budget Amendment, we passed those in Georgia. They're single subject matter. So if Washington enacts a Band-Aid of a Balanced Budget Amendment, those two calls go away and we never see an Article 5 convention to have a discussion. They have nothing to do with federalism. The Convention of States application is just broad enough to allow us to discuss anything that limits and reduces the scope and power of the federal government. It is federalism. It is us saying, state of Mississippi, we're going to send delegates to have a conversation in a room such as this with other delegates from other state legislatures to discuss what we all face collectively. And if we can agree on anything, by a majority in this room, we're going to send it back for ratification in the states. And I'm telling you right now, when that convention happens, through the technology and the transparency and the media coverage that we have, the entire world is going to be watching this country because they will see a United States for the first time in any of our lives. It will shake the foundation of Washington. If you think that your state would ratify something that your state doesn't agree with, just look at Wisconsin when they had 7,000 people inside their state capitol screaming. You think 7,000 is a lot? Let them try to touch the Second Amendment in Mississippi. My point is, the awakening that will happen through this convention is phenomenal. But the next breed of elected leaders going in Washington already are having a whole other understanding. There are so many elected state House members, Senate members that are reading the Constitution and trying to figure out the truth of the authorities and the responsibilities and the proper role of government that's laid out in the Constitution. The next breed of congressional leaders that go through this process, leaving these states, going into Congress, after going through this convention state process, will have a whole different understanding, a whole more clear, I'm telling you, Democrats even, I'm blown away with how they're digging into this Constitution and not disputing this. And I'll tell you, I'll end on this. I've been into Iowa, and New Mexico, where it's a Republican House and a Democrat Senate in both states. And what I found there was both parties said, look, we have partisan issues and we fight, and we get where we can't speak to each other. But at the end of the day, we govern every year. We have to govern. We don't get to do like some of these other states where you just shut them out and never discuss anything. This is not a partisan issue. This is something where we just sit down and have a discussion. So out of the 40 states that are controlled, the 40 House chambers, out of the 99 that are controlled by Democrats, and out of the 60, somewhere in those rough numbers, of the Republican-controlled houses, you have to assume that 13 of those most liberal and most conservative would agree to something that you and I would agree with. So what I'm telling you is I came out of that meeting realizing we have to have Article 5, and nothing will be ratified unless this country, nearly every single American, completely agrees with it. Because if you think for a minute that everyone's not going to know what's being proposed to be ratified when it comes out of this convention, with the media coverage that we're going to see. But I'm telling you, all of you sitting in here, it's going to take our elected leaders right now to lead this awakening. They may not have all the answers, but you got to have faith in the hearts and minds of men and women to learn what is proper, what is right as you're going through this process and it's happening. And you got to trust in the Almighty God to move on the hearts and minds of men and women in this country. Our founding fathers didn't have all the answers. All they knew was, come on, Washington commissioned his naval fleet with this flag. He paid for his naval ships to take on the largest navy in the history of the world. The sun never set on the British Navy. Think of the lunatic that he had to be. Think of the faith that he had to have in the Almighty hand to think that he could ever go up against those numbers. The revolution was started by less than 4% of the population in colonies. It was fought by less than 10%. And then if you need anything more than that, just look at the 12 disciples, the 11 disciples. So I appreciate you being here. I will tell you that there's got to be some work done here in Mississippi, and I'd love to have you help. ConventionStage.com is where you can find all the information you need. I'll be here the rest of the day if you need to ask me any questions. I'm willing to entertain them now, but I know we're right at time for lunch, so.
Is there like a time frame?
Any questions?
You want to change it after this happens?
Yeah, when can I get you to come speak to my group? We'll talk about that.
Sounds good. I'll give you my card if you need it, anytime I can be of help. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Every Thursday night, Convention of States has a conference call with the state leaders. So people from all over the United States get together and listen on the phone to what the planners are doing. One of the leaders of the Convention of States is Mark Meckler. Give me another one that I'm not calling to mind.
Mike Ferris.
Mike Ferris. Those people have made themselves available to me. When I participated on the phone call 2 weeks ago, it will be 2 weeks ago this coming Thursday, and they got him here that quickly. They are responsive. They know that we've got to get this done. I've been listening in for probably 9 months, I think, or something like that, and I was so busy with my legislative agenda this year that I couldn't spend a lot of time on it. But this year, I'm going to spend more time on it, because I think we are at that last moment, that very last moment, just as the other speakers have said. So, if you have any questions, be sure you bring them back to us. I have a little surprise. Has anybody been wondering about my hat? Yes. It has all your names in it.